Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's about 1:06. We're going to call this meeting of the TTCC meeting at KIPTA for July 8th, 2020 to order. A couple of points before we get started. What I'd like to do is, if everybody would take a few moments of private contemplation for any subject or people around the world or locally that we want to. In particular, I'm going to be thinking about David Burton's mother, who's been having some health issues. So for a moment, if you would, let's think about these situations. Thank you. Any members of the public that have comments, the way we're going to do comments from the public is to go on to the chat in the Zoom meeting that we're on. And while we're getting introductions and everything, if you want to go ahead and enter your comments in the chat, and then we'll check when we get to that agenda item so that we can take your comments there. And you'll have time to obviously speak if you want to. The next item is for Amanda, if you would. We're going to take a roll call since there are so many people. I guess we have about 26 TTCC members and quite a few public. We're going to just take the voting members or the alternates in terms of roll call, and then we'll look at public comment after that. So Amanda, if you would take roll call, please.
Hey, Jim, thank you. I was having some audio trouble. Did you call on me to do the roll call?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, very good. And Jim, I'll just call the voting members and alternates. I will not call the advisory members today, but everyone will be acknowledged, of course, in the meeting minutes. Judge Summers, Felicia Harper, Keith Griffey.
Amanda, maybe everybody might have their mutes on, so can you unmute everybody for the roll call?
Yes.
And maybe start from the beginning.
Okay. I'm having trouble finding the unmute. I muted everybody. If everybody could unmute themselves in the bottom left corner. I knew I saw Keith. Looks like we got most of you. And I think I have a pretty good idea of who's here, but I'll start over. Judge Summers, Felicia Harper, Keith Griffey.
Here.
That's you, Keith. Mayor Hodges, Matt Meunier,
Matt looks like he's frozen. Oh, there you go.
Here.
Hey, Matt. Mayor Deareth, Mayor Moore, Chad Reiskell, Andy Crouch, Mayor Armstrong, Lori Pacino, Elizabeth Hardin, Mayor Gahan, Larry Summers, John Rosenbarger, Chris John Streets, Mayor Hockenberry, Arthur Jones, Scott Fleming, Keenan Stratman.
Here.
Bernie Bowling, Brian Dixon, Jim Baker, Stacia Franklin, Don Lopp, Justin Tackett, Sean Seals, Kathy Eaton McCallop.
Present.
Emmanuel Nsanwu, Tony McClellan, Robin Bolte, Maria Bubit, Matt Yates, Emily Fox, Leslie Puff, Tanya Higdon,
Here.
Thomas Witt, Steve Ross, Tom Hall,
Here.
Tracy Lovell,
Here.
I heard you, but I don't see you, Tracy. Did I hear Tracy?
Here, yes.
Okay, very good, thank you. Amanda Spencer, I'm here. Eric Perez,
Here.
Tabitha Martin, Derek Morris,
Here.
Keith Pally, Michelle King,
Here.
Rachel Hamilton, Craig Butler,
Here.
Gretchen Milliken,
Here.
Michael King,
Here.
Tony Mattingly, Emily Lou,
Here.
Joe Reberman, Jeff O'Brien, Beth Stuber, Vanessa Burns, Milana Boz, Dirk Goen.
I'm here.
I'm here.
Who was that?
Lana.
Oh, hi, Milana, thank you.
Hi.
Dan Mann, Bob Slattery, Brian Sinwell, Judge Vogel, Kevin Nuss,
Amanda, either myself or Belinda, I think, is representing those alternates.
okay, so I've got Belinda for one of you and you for the other, Jim and Belinda, got it. Amy Alvey, Jeff Miles, George Ott, Brittany Montgomery,
Here.
Dylan Fisher, Kevin Beatty, Ryan Ramsey, Jeffrey Hoban, Aida Kopik.
I'm here.
Great, thank you. Let's make sure we have a quorum. 1, 2, 3. We sure do. We're good to go, Jim.
Okay, thanks. This is going to be a little bit cumbersome. I can see quite a few people. I can't see everyone. So just be patient if you're trying to make comment. Obviously, make sure your microphone is unmuted first. And we'll try to get through this. I can see, again, not everyone, but most folks. Amanda, the first thing is to check the chat. And I only see one that there was a question about they didn't have a microphone. This is the part of the agenda. Actually, the next agenda item is the Ttcc meeting minutes from February 12th of 2020. I'm sure we all remember what we did that day. I'm going to have to try to scan for who might make a motion for approval. Put you on
So
speaker.
moved.
Amanda, that's Keith, made a motion to move?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Aida seconds. Are there any questions or comments related to the approval of the minutes? There being none, I guess, Amanda, we will just, any objections, speak up. Otherwise, we'll take it as a unanimous in favor. How's that? Any objections to the approval of the minutes? There being none, all the ayes have it. Everybody present that's a voting member votes aye. The next agenda item is the Transportation Policy Committee report. Amanda?
Thank you. So the Transportation Policy Committee met last on April 23rd at 12:30 p.m. via Zoom. The fiscal year 21 work program, which outlines annual staffing, funding levels, and planned activities, was approved. Cost increases for 8 dedicated funded projects totaling over $6 million were approved. Staff shared the schedules for the first 2 opportunities to amend the new MTP and TIP. And those schedules can be found online in our planning portal. And we will hear more today about both of those amendments. Last, staff shared in that meeting administrative modification 1 to the fiscal year 20 to 25 TIP. And as always, meeting packets and minutes can be found on our website. I'd be glad to take any questions about this policy committee meeting.
Okay, if anybody has any questions about that, unmute your microphone and just say hello, and then I'll recognize you on speaker view. Any questions for Amanda about the TPC report? Okay, there being none, the next item is the public comment period. Amanda, you might check the chat, but I don't see any or any questions. Again, there's still an opportunity for anybody from the public that might be on this Zoom meeting to be recognized. If you are and want to comment, just unmute your microphone and say hello. I'm not seeing anyone. So with that, we'll go on to, and again, what I think we'll do for the action items where we have to take action, I'll be looking for a motion to approve. Again, somebody just say hello and we'll try to get somebody recognized, and a second. And then what we'll, go ahead, Amanda, you got.
Jim, to clarify, public attendees are not able to unmute themselves, but they can type it in chat and I'll be glad to unmute them.
Okay, great. So we didn't have anybody on that part of the agenda, so nobody had requested to be on board. So again, going back to the protocol here on this Zoom meeting, because there's so many people, when we take a vote, what I'll ask for is anybody that's in objection to the motion. And then I'm going to make an assumption that all others are voting in favor. And I think that will satisfy our minutes for the meeting. So with that, I'm going to call the next agenda item, which is amendment number 1 to the Connecting Kentuckiana 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And that is Nick.
Thank you, Jim. So amendment 1, this is our first amendment to the new Connecting Kentuckiana 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, as well as the fiscal year 2020 to 2025 Transportation Improvement Program. Staff received, I believe it's project changes and/or new projects that were added, TIP and/or MTP. In addition to those project changes, which are included in the packet, we are also revising the federally required safety performance targets. That is something that I believe Andy brought to committees way back earlier this year for approval. I think it might have been February. It was February 2020. So we are incorporating those new targets into the 2 documents as were required by the federal government. We did receive, I believe it was 4 comments from the public during our 15-day comment period. And those were sent to all TPC members. There were 2 that were opposing the expansion of I-65. There was a comment in support of US 42 and I believe 1 other. Those were sent out, and TPC has an ongoing comment period where they can address or respond to those comments directly. And we'll take that up with the TPC in 2 weeks. Again, these changes are considered major changes and that impact air quality. So we had to do all of our air quality conformity activities. And that's kind of the key difference between an amendment and an administrative modification, which we do more informally. At this time, before I take action, I'll take or address any questions or comments that may have. Okay.
And you got one, protocol wise, if anybody wants to ask questions, just unmute your mic, say hello, and recognize you.
Going once, going twice. Okay. All right. Thank you, Jim. So action is requested for TTCC to recommend TPC approval of Amendment 1 to the Connecting Kentuckiana 2040 MTP, the fiscal year 2020 to 25 KIP, and the safety targets found in the KIPTA Performance Management Plan.
Does anybody want to make that motion?
I make the motion that we accept Amendment 1 and the revision to the targets.
Okay, Dirk Goen makes the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Aida popped up first, so Aida makes a second. Any questions or comments regarding the motion? There being none, I'll take anybody that might be opposed to the motion. Say aye. There being none, I'll take this as a unanimous vote from all the voting members and alternates for support of the motion.
Thank you all.
Next agenda item is the call for projects from Kentucky. And again, that's Nick.
All right. Thanks, Jim. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this item because it's a pretty significant one, something that we don't do all that often, to be honest. So the Kentucky Call for Projects was announced in March 2020. KIPTA receives 2 what we call dedicated funding programs through the state of Kentucky. One is the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, which essentially can fund almost any transportation project on the federal aid system, as well as transit and bike and ped projects. So there's a big umbrella there for eligibility. We had about $20 million available that could be used, spread over 5 years. And there was another program, the Transportation Alternatives Program, TA. And this program is essentially for bike, pedestrian, transit type projects that are focused on the individual kind of non-motorized transportation. So we announced the call in March. The deadline to submit was was end of May 2020. We did receive 28 applications for the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program and 6 applications for the Transportation Alternatives Program. There's a detailed recommendation report that was basically a summary of the project working group who met twice to review these applications. And I'm going to go through that a little bit for everyone's information. And let's see if I can. So essentially, well, let me back up. 2 things real quickly. On the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, we received 28 applications. I want to say 8 of those applications were rescinded by Louisville Metro. They were for street rehabilitation on 8 different projects. And those were rescinded because the recent Louisville Metro budget has provided enough funding to cover all of those projects. So while they were originally seeking funding through the TPC, through the MPO, they pulled those applications or rescinded them. We only ended up with basically consideration of 20 applications, 18 of which are recommended for funding. And I'm going to go over those briefly here. Let me see if I can pull up a. Share. Can I share my screen, Amanda?
You should be able to, Nick, at the bottom. There's a share.
It's saying I'm disabled right now.
Is it in OneDrive? I'll get it for you.
I was going to open up that map actually that I emailed.
Okay, let me find it.
So let me explain a little bit about how the project working group came to their decision making with the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. That's essentially all the members of that working group, the TTCC working group, were asked to provide a rank for each of the projects based on a variety of factors, whether it's potential performance impacts, rank in the MTP, consideration of how ready is that project. And so there was a lot of factors that were considered. The group spent a considerable amount of time, probably 2 hours, 2.5 hours over 2 days. And so the highest ranked Surface Transportation Block Grant program or project was Mount Washington's Historic Multi-Use Trail Segment C. This is an ongoing program that was originally funded by KYTC. Didn't receive full funding, so this project competed for both surface transportation funds for the new traffic signal that's going to go in at Landis Lane, as well as additional transportation alternatives funds to cover the remaining portion of the bike and ped, the multi-use trails and whatnot. So they did request $888,213. $888,213 for the traffic signal portion of the project. The working group does recommend the award of those funds. So that project, I think, and if you could maybe just zoom in on that one. We've got a map here that's got all of the projects listed that are being recommended for funding. You'll see the green projects are surface transportation block grant projects. The blue ones are the transportation alternatives projects. And the red ones, we put them in there because Louisville Metro did request funding, and although they rescinded them, we felt it was important to show that although those projects aren't being funded by us, they are still going to be completed. So you can see those projects in red. So down in Mount Washington, you've got the project down there that is the historic multi-use trail. The next project, the next highest ranked project was Louisville Metro's Baxter Bardstown Premium Transportation Corridor Section 1. This is a multi-pronged project. So the first portion of this project is to install expand the fiber footprint and connecting traffic signals along the route. So this project, Louisville Metro requested $2.2 million in federal funds for it. And the working group does recommend the award of that amount. Again, you can see that project stretching from Baxter all the way down to Hikes Lane, I believe. The next project that was on the list is the Louisville Metro's Homestead Parkway's multi-use pass system. This is there's 9 sections of this project. This is the first one, and it's going to be going to construction soon. The request is for $2.2 million. You can see this project on the far left over in Algonquin Southwestern Parkway area. So this project will reduce gaps in the pedestrian network and improve bicycle access. And the project working group does recommend award of the $2.2 million that was requested. The next project is Bullitt County, Kentucky 44. They've just requested funding for the preliminary engineering portion of the project. They are going to be competing for, I believe, a federal USDOT grant to complete the project. It's on Kentucky 44. It would expand US 31, or it would expand it from US 31 to Kings Church Road to 4 lanes and add a center turn lane for the other portion that goes from Kings Church Road to the Spencer County line. They requested $800,000, and the working group is recommending the award of $800,000. Next on the list is the Louisville Metro Kentucky Air Education Program. You won't see this one on the list. It is a program that's region-wide. It's funded in, or the MPO does fund this project in Indiana. I think they've competed a few times for CMAQ funds in Kentucky in the last couple of years and haven't received them. This funding award would fund the operations of that program for 5 fiscal years at $200,000 a year. And the project working group did recommend the award of $1 million to that project. Next is the Louisville Metro Heights Lane Rehabilitation Project. This is a $3.4 million construction project that spans from Taylorsville Road to Newburg. And there are definitely areas along this corridor that have borderline and/or poor pavement condition. And so the working group did recommend award of $3.4 million. Next, the Jeffersontown, I think it's Galen Drive and Sproul Road Collector Extension. So this project proposes a kind of a realignment of Galen Road and an extension of Sproul over to Taylorsville Road. They requested design funds, utility right-of-way and construction. And while the working group isn't fully funding the project, what they did decide to do was recommend the award of $300,000 federal for a planning study to do a needs assessment and identify alternatives and things of that nature. So the working group did like the project, but they wanted to take a step back a little bit and do a planning study first. Louisville Metro, the next project on the list, Louisville Metro's East Market Streetscape. This is kind of a traffic calming, bike improvements. There's a variety of things going on that are kind of bike and ped friendly. On market, I believe it's from Baxter or Wenzel for about, I think, 8 or 10 blocks, including the intersecting streets there. They requested $7.2 million to construct this project, and the project working group is recommending that award. Next on the list is the City of Prospect's US 42 Safety Improvement Project. Like the Jeffersontown project, the working group is in support of the project, but would like to take a step back and first do a planning study that would be funded at $300,000 federal to again look at the existing conditions, do a needs assessment, and identify alternatives. Next on the list is the Oldham County Kentucky 22 corridor study. This project will study the corridor from Hounds Lane to Kentucky 329, safety improvements, reduce congestion, and need for bike and pedestrian facilities. The project working group is recommending the full award of $225,000 to complete that planning study. Next on the list is the University of Louisville's Floyd Street Roundabout, Cardinal Boulevard, Brandeis, Arthur, and other campus improvements. Basically, they are requesting an additional $2.4 million to continue work in the U of L campus area. These funds would primarily be used in the South 3rd Street, South 4th Street area where there's a lot of pedestrian traffic, obviously with the students and the folks who live around there. And so this would kind of create some safety, some designated street crossing, and the project working group is recommending the $1.43 million for this project. The next two projects, sorry, not the next two projects. Oldham County Kenwood Road project. They did request, the county did request full funding for all of the phases of the project. And while the project working group was in support of the project, it was lower on the priority list. And so the recommendation here is that the design phase be programmed in fiscal year 2024. If TTCC and TPC approve this, it would be also, we would also be making a commitment to funding the future phases of the project outside, in 2026 or beyond. So there is additional impact there where you would see an additional $3 to $4 million programmed when we get closer to fiscal year 2026 and 2027. The next two projects are not being recommended for funding. These are the only two that were not, and it's not that they're a bad project. It's simply priorities were made, rankings were set, and there was a lot of discussion about all of the projects. Louisville CBD streetlight rehabilitation requested 1.1, and the working group is not recommending funding. Again, not because it's a bad project, just there were higher priorities from the perspective of the working group. And then Oldham County's Commerce Parkway widening, same thing here. Not a bad project. At this time, there wasn't enough funding to cover these lower priorities. So those are the surface transportation block grant projects that are being recommended. It's about a little over $20 million in total funding. And then again, there's 8 projects, street rehabilitations that Louisville Metro is going to do with their local funds. And you can see those projects in red on the map. One other thing that I want to mention in terms of the surface transportation block grant program is one component of this is we did receive a request during the week that the Ttcc was, the working group was meeting, the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet for a cost increase for Chynoweth Lane. It's an existing project that's already funded with MPO dedicated dollars, about $109,000 or $189,000 needed in federal funds to complete the right-of-way portion. And so the working group was made aware of this. KIPTA staff followed up with every other project sponsor in the region, in the Kentucky side of the region, to see if anyone else had cost increase needs. And so just to clarify, this money is kind of being carved out along with the new projects that were just awarded that are being proposed for funding awards. So again, Kentucky Transportation Cabinet is being recommended a award of $189,000, and this was also in the recommendation report. Anybody have questions about that before I move on to the Transportation Alternatives Program?
If
Okay.
you have questions, again, just unmute and say hello and we'll recognize you.
Perfect. All right, let me see if I
Nick.
think I can share my screen now. Can you guys see my screen? Hold on. Actually, Amanda, if you don't mind, it was actually probably easier if you could kind of guide them on the map while I read the recommendation report. So the Transportation Alternatives Program, we had a little over $5 million available over 5 years that had to be spread out somewhat equally, about $1 million a year, just because that's how much we receive annually. All 6 projects that were applied for are being recommended for funding. There's enough funding to cover them all. The highest ranked project was, again, the Mount Washington Historic Multi-Use Trail Segment C project. This is the bike pedestrian portion of this project. The next project on the list was Louisville Metro's Crumbs Lane Sidewalk Phase 1. This is, I think there's 3 or 4 of these Louisville Metro sidewalk projects that kind of connect to Dixie Highway. And this one is, the project working group is recommending the full award of $621,000. Next, we have the Louisville Metro Newburg Road Sidewalk. This will reduce gaps in the pedestrian network and enhance access to the TARC bus stops in that area. And the working group did recommend the award of $746,000. Louisville Metro Blanton Lane Sidewalk. Again, this is part of the Dixie Highway kind of multimodal area where the project working group is recommending $1,134,000 federally. Bernheim Lane Sidewalk and Road Reconfiguration is another one that is being recommended. And the project working group recommended the $374,000 that was requested. And then finally, we have, I think it's Gaggle Sidewalk, Gaggle Lane Sidewalk. And that will improve pedestrian access as well to those TARC bus stops near the Dixie Highway. And the total award recommended for them is $1,412,000. So those are the 6 transition alternatives projects that are being recommended. If you want more details about the like when each phase is being programmed, they are included in the recommendation report. There was also a proposed tracking sheet that I know is difficult to read. We're trying to figure out a way to how to show 5 fiscal years and all these different funding programs in an easier to read manner. But for right now, that was included in the packet. And so before I ask for the motions that I have, there's 3 of them. Again, I want to open it back up for questions or comments about, maybe what the working group was thinking, or if there's any questions, just feel free to raise them now.
Nick, would you unshare your screen so we can see the gallery view better?
Yes.
There we go. Thanks.
Thanks, Amanda. Okay. So there are 3 action requests here that have to be taken separately because we had a couple unique things. It's not just the recommending of the projects, the new projects. The first one is the group is recommending, I think it's 4 planning studies. And so the amount being recommended exceeds the threshold that the project management process sets in place, which is 2% annually. So it exceeds that amount, but the committees can take action to approve a waiver essentially, so that we can award more than above that amount. So my first action is for you all to recommend TPC approve a waiver to the project management process rules to allow more than 2% annually to be utilized from the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program for planning studies.
Does anybody want to make that motion?
So moved.
Aida, is there a second, please?
Second.
Matt, seconds. Any comments or questions related to the motion? Not seeing any objectors to the motion. Seeing no objections to the motion, I'm going to take this as a unanimous approval by all voting members and alternates of the TTCC. Oh, Matt?
I was voting yes. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to see. We don't have access to everybody on the screen, so I'm assuming that the way we're doing it without objections is going to suffice for the minutes and the vote.
Okay.
And I don't see anybody on any chat that's had any comments either. So the ayes have it. Nick, your next motion is?
Yes, the next motion is to recommend TPC approval of the cost increase for the right-of-way phase of KYTC's Chynoweth Lane project, KIPTA ID 213.
Motion to approve the right-of-way cost increase, Chynoweth Lane.
Okay, Dirk makes a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Matt. Any comments or questions regarding the motion first? Not seeing any. Are there any those voting members in objection to the motion? Not seeing or hearing any. I'm going to take that as a unanimous vote in favor of the motion.
Okay. Last action I'm requesting is to recommend TPC approval of the 12. Sorry, is it 12? Yes, of the 12 new Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, Surface Transportation Block Grant projects, and 6 new TA projects.
Make a motion to accept all the new STBG and TAP projects.
Second.
Motion by Dirk and a second by Keith. Any questions about the motion or comments? Not seeing or hearing any. Are there any people who are not in favor, who object to the motion? Not seeing or hearing any. I'll take that as a unanimous decision by the voting and alternate members in favor.
Thank you all.
All right, well, thanks. The next agenda item is the COVID-19 transportation impacts. Andy?
All right, thank you, Jim. It's good to see everybody again. It's been a while since I've seen a lot of you guys, so look forward to getting together soon. I'm going to try to share my screen, and if not, Amanda might have to fill in. So hang with me just a sec. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, you guys can hear me as well, it sounds like. All right. So at KIPTA, we've been trying to keep track with what some of the impacts are due to all of the various shutdowns in this era of COVID-19. So this is a brief presentation on the traffic impacts and also the crash impacts, which is pretty remarkable. And I'll show you some data on both here in a moment. So just to clarify, and many of you all already know this, but KIPTA currently is a subscriber to the Streetlight platform. Streetlight provides, or typically provides, origin destination data, but they've been really focused on tracking these travel trends, and they've produced the data more quickly every other week as opposed to every month, and putting that data out for agencies like ours to report on and to track. The latter half of this presentation is about the crash data, and at KIPTA we get our crash data in Kentucky from the Kentucky State Police crash database, crashinformationky.org, and in Indiana it's called the ARIES portal. The Indiana one is password protected, so we've got a little more information in Indiana, but in Kentucky we have all the information we need to do this sort of analysis. And another important thing is that March 16th, that's the date we've used. A lot of this stuff is before and after. What were conditions like before? Many businesses and schools and things were shut down, and after. So March 16th, if I'm not mistaken, that's the day, for instance, that that was the first day I think schools were closed, for instance. It's also a good break point, given that Streetlight provides the data every other month to us. So here's some of the headlines. We can get into more detail about some of these, and maybe some of the discussion have to come later. But all of these I think are remarkable on their own. So I'll start on the first one. What we've seen is that back in early April was the low water mark. The low water mark for traffic levels in this region. That number of 57%, that is in early April, traffic around this region was about 57% of the levels in early March, which we used as our baseline. So we've got more recent data, and Streetlight has kind of delayed some of it. So the most recent we have right now is early May. They were producing a little bit more quickly, but what we've seen, I think what most of us that drive a little bit these days and probably have noticed, is that the traffic has rebounded. The most recent data we have happens to be from early May, and that shows it's about 2/3 of those baseline levels. One of the things I thought about going into this was, well, what are the impacts on the Ohio River bridges? We got governors saying, don't leave your state. Other impacts that probably keep people in their home state. Well, the trends show that while that's probably happening, it wasn't happening any more or any less than the overall trends. So the traffic was reduced on the bridges just like it was on most of the other interstates and arterials around the region. And so these last two bullet points on here have to do with, mostly to do with crashes. And so what we've found is that the crashes have decreased far more than the traffic levels. And so I highlighted that there, but I think the probably one of the most remarkable pieces of transportation data I've seen in a long time is that number right there. It says 64% reduction. So what I mean by that is that from January 1st to mid-March, pre-shutdowns, versus March 16th to or through the end of May, crashes were reduced by 64% in this region. That is remarkable. There's not, I can't think of anything else that, we're looking for reductions around the fringe that are reduced by 2 or 5 or 10%. But a 64% reduction is absolutely remarkable. It's especially remarkable when we compare it to the traffic impacts. Those traffic levels, they've only been reduced by a huge number, no doubt, but only by about 20 to 45%, depending on the time that you're looking at. That last bullet point there is probably just as remarkable. It might be the most remarkable thing if it wasn't for that 64% reduction. That is, when we compare this year's crashes and the post-COVID-19 shutdowns, that is March 16th through the data that's through the end of May, there have been about 3,000 crashes, just under 3,000 crashes. Those same dates last year, there were just under 9,000 crashes. So in those 3 months, or those, I think it's 76 days, so whatever that is, 2.5 months, there's been 6,000 fewer crashes. That's remarkable. Unfortunately, though, what we've seen is that even though there are 6,000 fewer crashes, the number of deaths, traffic-related fatalities, happen to be the exact same in the 5-county region, the exact same number from last year. So far fewer crashes, same number of deaths. So you'd think those would go hand in hand, but they don't in this case. So getting into some of the data or the graphs. I'm trying. Oh. Okay, so this graph's a bit of a mess, but what this is, and I'll explain this here because the next few look kind of just like this. The way we've analyzed it is we've looked at a series of locations that Louisville Metro staff and others have kind of helped us develop that we believe are representative of traffic more generally. So you'll see, I think the number is 55 lines happen to be on here. I don't know if you can count them or not, but if you could, there'd be 55 lines on here, and those represent the 55 locations in the KIPTA MPO region that we have been tracking using Streetlight. Okay, so we've been tracking it at twice a month. So these are the conditions in early March, late March, early April, late April, etc. And what we've been comparing them to is the ratio or a percentage. I guess it's a percentage of the baseline volume. So you'll see that in early March, they all happen to go to the same point. So that's our baseline we've utilized. We've basically made the assumption that early March traffic was, for the most part, normal. Okay, so February 2020, for the most part, we see an increase from February to March. That's typical. That is, traffic in the wintertime is typically less than it is in the spring and summer. So you see, for the most part, we see growth going into March. But then in that late March time period, that early April time period, traffic plummets. It plummets as low as, in one instance, 40%, about 40% of that early March time period. There's good range, by the way, too, right? We see some that only drop by 20, 25%, while some drop near 60%. What we also see on this graph is that we see it rebounding. Again, we only have through early May. Streetlight says the late May will be available late tomorrow. So maybe this time next month or in the future, I can show a fuller picture of this that shows the rebound and how much we've rebounded now and also going forward. But we see virtually all of them have the same pattern. That is, they plummeted to their trough, if you will, here in late March and early April. One notable thing, I guess, on this one is, and I'll point out a little bit more on this in the future or in the next slide or two. What we've seen is that the impact is less in the rural areas than it is in the urban areas. Okay, so the top line, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but nonetheless, I guess this navy blue line that's more along at the top, that is I-65 near Henryville, Indiana. So about as rural as it gets in the KIPTA region. The baby blue line or the light blue line that's at the bottom, that happens to be Newburg Road, north of Trevilian. So pretty urban, suburban type area, may perhaps show an impact of, among other things, Bellarmine is right there. So Bellarmine closed down probably around that time. So that shows the impact. So again, the impacts were more, the decrease was greatest in the urban area, the most urban area. It was least in the rural area. In the suburban counties, the suburban areas and suburban counties are the in-between, if you will. So here it is looked at, interstates only. So those 55 lines happen to be a mix of interstates and arterials, probably a couple collectors, but mostly arterials. But nonetheless, they were chosen to represent different parts of the county, different traffic volumes in terms of the scope and the magnitude of their ADTs. So here's the interstates only. So perhaps you can see some from your area. Again, we've got the top one happens to be that that one near Henryville, Indiana. While in this case, since it's interstates, this one at the blue one at the bottom, that is I-64 east of I-264. So this is out south of Oxmoor Mall. Here's the Ohio River bridges. They follow similar patterns as each other. And they also show a similar decrease. So cross river mobility hasn't been stifled any more than the other, the traffic region wide. And again, at least I personally found that to be a little bit surprising. I would have expected that the bridge volumes would have dropped by more than the non-bridge links. Here it is by county, and this helps illustrate maybe what I was showing earlier. This yellow or orange one at the bottom is Jefferson County. It's consistently lower. That is, volumes in Jefferson County are a lesser percentage of their baseline volumes than the other counties. I've got the KIP to add counties on here as well as kind of the medium green. You see those, they kind of fall in line in this case, but some of those were less impacted. Okay, moving on. So that's kind of the traffic impact. So moving on to crashes. And again, this is, I think, some of the most remarkable data I've seen in a long time. So here's what I was mentioning earlier, kind of in a graph, showing the number of crashes represented in the number of crashes per day. There for a while, we didn't have the same number of days representing these periods, but coincidentally, these are both 76-day periods. That is March 1st through January 1 through March 16th, and then March 17th through the end of May. This shows the number of crashes per day in our region. So this expressed as a percentage on the far right there, that 106 crashes per day or this winter has decreased to 38 crashes per day, a decrease of 64%. Huge decrease. Here's a similar graph that represents the number of traffic fatalities per day. And so all of the crash data, the fatalities probably most importantly, should be considered to be preliminary. There's some, there could be some changes, but these are pretty firm. They're not going to change a lot. Let's put it that way. So here's what we're showing in that where we saw a 64% decrease in crashes pre-COVID-19 shutdowns versus post. The decrease in fatalities is minor, 10 to 15%. I don't have a graph to show it, but keep in mind what I said earlier, that not only did the crashes not decrease from this winter to this spring, pre and post COVID, but the crashes did not decrease this year versus last, despite there being 6,000 fewer crashes, or expressed as a crashes per day, 64% fewer crashes. So I think that is a remarkable thing. My personal working hypothesis is that what we've seen pairing all this together is that what's probably disappeared are those crashes related to congestion. So those, if you don't have congestion, you lose a lot of certain types of crashes. Does that explain them all? I don't know. Their speed impacts, and so the severity of the crashes has not been diminished all that much. Injuries fall comfortably in between here. They've dropped by, I think the number's 30 to 35%. So again, the fatalities haven't dropped virtually at all. The crashes in general have dropped tremendously. Injuries are comfortably in between. So I'll wrap up with some, I don't know, perhaps just some food for thought. I'm very curious, and I've seen some other data showing that the newer data, the newer traffic data, and I guess perhaps, I hope not, the newer crash data will show that we're back to normal. We're getting really close to it. We're getting closer every month, every time period. Another thing to be thinking about is, are any of these impacts, are they long lasting? The way that society has chosen to change how we travel, or forced to change how we travel, and now in the future choose to change how we travel. How many of these, if any, are long lasting? And then that leads to that third question there is just something to be think about. What should we be doing? What should we be doing to adjust to that? For example, is a widespread work from home program going to limit our peak hour congestion? I think that's a possible, if not likely, byproduct of this. If far more people a year from now are working from home than a year ago, it sure does look like that will have major ramifications and hopefully positive ones in terms of congestion and then in terms of the number of crashes. I'd be happy to answer any other questions. I'd also be happy to talk offline with anybody if we want to expand anything locally and check into anything using our streetlight capabilities. But is there any questions? I'd be happy to help anybody out with them. And with that, I guess, Jim, I guess I'll turn it back to you.
Any questions for Andy or comments?
I would like to ask a question, please.
Go ahead, Aida.
Andy, a great presentation, thank you. I was wondering, did you look at the origin and destination data from Streetlight? Basically, my question is, it would be good to have better understanding where the population is traveling during the crisis, where are the essential jobs, and where are the most important destinations that have to be connected in a long term, so to say.
Yeah, that's a really good question. There are short answer is no. Longer answer is Streetlight allows several different analysis types. This one happens to be the one we utilized heavily here with something called the zone activity analysis. So it's effectively, it's not exactly looking at VMT, and it's not exactly a traffic count, but in essence, it's a traffic count, the activity over these locations on an average day. But there's no reason. It is a big picture analysis that we certainly want to do. Say, hey, in summer of 2020, how do people travel in terms of where do they travel? How long of trips are they making? Are they making shorter trips? Are they not going to places by and large? Are they going to? Are there some locations that people are going to more? Some of those locations we added in the past month or two on behalf of Metro, where we wanted to make sure we had some coverage near things like parks and hospitals, because perhaps there are more trips to those types of places. And so that's a very good question. It is something that that's probably not represented directly in the data I presented today, but it's certainly something that we are capable of and very curious to look at going forward.
Thank you.
Anybody else with any questions or comments for Andy? Hearing no others, that was not an action item, so we'll go on to the next agenda item, and that is Amanda's going to talk about the safety category amendments to group projects.
Great, thank you, Jim. So in January of 2019, the Transportation Policy Committee adopted a group project policy to streamline the process of evaluating and adding.
I'm sorry, there was somebody on chat. I just noticed that there was a chat question from and it says this must have already been addressed, but with the consistent number, and this goes back to Andy, with the consistent number of fatalities, is there data in what is consistent in each fatality, or are they in the same areas? Does the data show a solution or an infrastructure project that may fix those? So I apologize for interrupting you, Amanda, but I just noticed that chat question.
So,
Want me to repeat that again?
No, I can see it. Actually, I'm kind of reading it right now. So are they in the same areas? So no, or not always, that's for sure. And part of the justification for that answer is when we're dealing with these traffic fatalities, thank goodness we're dealing with smaller sample sizes. So I think that I think the number is around, I think it was in the mid 20s. That is, let's say around 25 fatalities. I believe that's about right in that time period. So we don't have a big number of fatalities, and so no, they're not at a to my knowledge, anyways. There's not an abundance of them at a certain location, and I guess that gets at, does the data show a solution or infrastructure project that might fix those? No, not directly in this case. I think what's seems to be fairly obvious is that speed. Speed is an issue. Now, there's two things about speed. One is congestion's been removed from the equation for the most part, so people are going a little faster. That's pretty good as long as they're going, they're going more smoothly. Traffic's flowing more smoothly. But have there been lots of opportunities for people to be, lacking a better word, hot rods, where there wasn't traffic out there, where they're used to seeing traffic, and do people behave differently now that there's open roads, or that there were open roads in April? Perhaps that's not the case right now. So that's something that to look at further, because I think the way that that hierarchy, lots of crashes, or a lot fewer crashes, some number in the middle of fewer injuries, and virtually no fewer fatalities seems to would be pretty good evidence there. So I hope that answered the question.
Thanks, Andy, and I appreciate going back to that. So Amanda, we'll go back to your agenda item now. Thank you.
Sure thing. Thanks, Jim. So again, in January of 2019, the TPC adopted this group project policy intended to streamline how we go about adding projects to our planning documents. And that policy established 8 project type categories. For each, a cost threshold was identified. So anything above the threshold cannot be considered a group project. It cannot be administratively modified into the TIP. In other words, anything above those thresholds that were established, those projects are required to go through the longer amendment process. And the idea was to set these thresholds in such a way that the fairly typical air quality exempt, not regionally significant projects to proceed in an expedited fashion as group projects via administrative mod. But anything else would be captured, if you will, and processed as an amendment, ensuring careful consideration, especially by the public. So after utilizing this policy over the last year, and after working closely with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet over the last few months, staff has determined that a more appropriate threshold for the safety improvement category would be $2 million. It's currently at $1 million. And again, we find this to be a more appropriate threshold for this category to achieve the intended goal. It will expedite delivery of important safety improvements that are, again, air quality exempt, not regionally significant. I'd be glad to take any questions about our proposal to increase this limit. And action is requested that the TTCC would recommend to TPC to increase the safety improvement threshold in our group project policy from $1 million to $2 million.
Hey, any questions or comments for Amanda? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion, and that is to recommend the Transportation Policy Committee the total cost threshold of the safety improvement category included in the group project policy be increased from $1 million to $2 million. Anybody want to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, there's a motion by Tanya. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Matt. First, any questions or comments regarding the motion, what we're voting on? Seeing none, is there anybody in objection to the motion? Seeing no objections, I'll take that as a unanimous vote in favor of the motion. Next agenda item is amendment number 2 to the Connecting Kentucky, Indiana 2040 MTP and fiscal year 2020 to 2025 Transportation Improvement Program. Is Nick.
Thank you, Jim. So yeah, this is just a heads up that we are getting close to the deadline to submit any changes to projects that may have an impact on air quality or are regionally significant. I think we set a deadline of July 31st, kind of working with KYTC on that because there's going to be a lot of projects, I think, that come from a lot of project changes that come from the 6-year highway plan that was enacted earlier this year. The schedule essentially for this amendment 2 to the new TIP and MTP, again, deadline to submit is July 31. Staff will review and perform air quality conformity activities with APCD from mid-August to mid-September. There'll be a public comment period from September 22nd to October 6th, the 15-day required period, and then bring those changes and that amendment back to you all in October. Normally the turnaround time for federal review is about 30 or 45 days. So we hope that those project changes can be pretty much sealed and ready for project authorization end of October, early November. Again, I can take any questions or comments you may have. The schedule for both Amendment 1 and Amendment 2 is on our transportation planning portal under guidance. So if you have any questions later on, feel free to check out that schedule. There's no action required. Does anybody have any questions or comments at this time?
Hello, hey, this is Tom Hall with KYTC District 5.
Yeah.
I would just like to make the comment that, the bulk of those projects and that we would put into Amendment 2 require that we have some specific detailed funding information, which we don't have yet. So we're not in a position to start putting projects in. So my suggestion would be maybe we ought to be considering putting this off or extending the deadline, maybe 30 days, or alternatively putting together a plan for Amendment 3. Because, I know what work needs to be done. I'm just not in a position to do it yet because I don't have the information.
Totally understand. I don't think that would be an issue at all. I mean, Amendment 2 is pretty much for the 6-year highway plan, and I don't know of any other project sponsors that are being able to add new air quality impacting projects. NDOT has done most of, I think, adding their fiscal year 2021 projects to Amendment 1. So, Amanda, your thoughts on delaying it another month?
Sure, if it doesn't sound like it's going to slow down any other important projects. That's perfectly fine. Like you said, we specifically set this one up to help the cabinet get the highway plan incorporated. So be glad to extend that.
So I will update that schedule. We'll update that schedule that's posted on our planning portal, and basically everything will be moved 1 month.
Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Is there any other business that needs to come before the TTCC today? I don't hear or see anybody, so I will take this as a unanimous motion by all to adjourn. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I appreciate it.
Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.